thank you all for coming out and checking into the Family Peace Initiative. I have a prepared presentation, but I also want to be able to be very tuned in to questions and thoughts and things that you're interested in talking about. And so I'm open to being very, very flexible. Ida is going to keep track of the chat a little bit and just kind of keep it posted. And I am fine pausing in the middle of the presentation to go on a rabbit hole someplace else. If you have something that you would like to be discussing, I want to make this time valuable for you. So before I get started with my presentation, are there any thoughts or comments, questions about my brief 12 minutes or anybody's 12-minute presentation during the panel? Is anybody bringing a question with them? I'm going to take that you're very excited for my presentation and that you can't wait for that to get going. So let's get started here. Um, see if I can get this going here. So, and in the Ida, in the file that you had me upload, there's some forms that I'd love for people to get access to. I don't know if you can dump them into the chat or,
Okay.
but I mentioned during during the brief presentation just a little bit ago that it's a 27-week or 52-week program, but there's some fundamental pieces of this program that I really want to spend some time covering so that you understand, at least understand more of what we do in the Family Peace Initiative. I think it's really important to consider that the skill of the facilitator is the X factor in pattern intervention programs. And all of us have room to improve, including me. And I can give you evidence from just last week that would attest to that very thing, that I need to be better. But in the quest for mastery, I would argue that we'll never get to mastery, but the more we can pursue mastery and get closer to a highly skilled facilitator status, the better off women, children, victims of domestic violence will be. Because many times people who have never even met us are relying on us or hoping for us to be able to have a positive impact on their partner, their person they're co-parenting with, or the person who is still in their lives in some form or fashion. And so I would encourage you to become dedicated to becoming the best facilitator that you can be. A couple of things in the packet. We put in a process of change chart, which really moves from beliefs and attitudes that are common for those who are battering and the beliefs and attitudes for those who live in a more equal, respectful relationship. And we've also put in there a river of cruelty map that I'm going to talk with you about in just a few moments. If I had had time in the 12 minutes, I would have talked to you about some of the outcomes that we have had and ways that we've been examining them. And the first thing I want you to know is that the Family Peace Initiative pursues information on how are we doing. And if we get information that we're not doing well, that what we're doing is not working, I can promise you that our whole staff knows we will change on a dime in order to do something that is more effective, that matters more. And so we're always looking for ways to evaluate how we're doing. One of the significant things that happened was the Attorney General's office here in the state of Kansas. They took a look at 6 programs in 2015. 5 of the programs used the Family Peace Initiative approach. The other program was trained by us, but they used a different curriculum. And what they found, they looked at 3 years from 2012 to 2015, and they were looking at did the person receive another in-person charged crime since their date of completion from the program in 2012, or did they have another protection order filed against them? So essentially, a new charge for a person issue, new protection order. And what the Attorney General's office found was that 88% of the people 3 years later had not had another person crime, and 90% had not had a protection order filed against them. And we thought that was very significant. It was not research that we did, it was completely done by the Attorney General's office, the Office of Judicial Administration, and the BIP Advisory Board all worked together to try to determine, is battering intervention being, is it working? And man, it came across as very positive for us. Shawnee County, the YWCA, Center for Safety and Empowerment, has been collecting police lethality reports at the location of the call. So when they get called to a domestic violence case, they go, and if it's a domestic violence issue, they will fill out a lethality and risk of lethality report. And the YWCA has been collecting and documenting each and every report since 2015, I believe. And so what we decided to do was give them a list of our completers and just say, hey, we don't care if they got a new charge or a new PFA. I want to know, did the police go on another call? Whether there was a charge or not. Did somebody say, help, I'm not safe, and did the police show up on a call? And 85% of those who were in the completers list were not anywhere on a call. And this is over a 6-year time span. And so it wasn't even, was there a new charge? It was just simply, was somebody scared enough to call to get help? And 15% were found to have a new domestic violence call in this 6-year time frame. And this is a statement from Becca Spielman, who's the director of the Center for Safety and Empowerment, who's been an incredible supporter. In fact, the Family Peace Initiative used to be housed at the YWCA and ultimately moved out into an independent location in 2015. We've had support of victim advocacy agencies since our inception. So talking a little bit about resources and support, we have a facilitators training series. We have been dedicated to training facilitators in the internal focus model and how to use the river of cruelty to more easily access people's internal focus conversation. And much of that is simply asking people what they're feeling, mad, sad, glad, or afraid, asking them what's happening in their body. Because as soon as I ask you, what are you feeling? You have to be able to turn to an internal focused awareness to be able to assess what emotion is going through my body and where is it located? What is happening in my body? That is the beginning doorways to an internal focused conversation. Now, I want to be able to talk with you a little bit about battering motive, because this is the heartbeat of Dorothy's work since the early 90s. And I mentioned it in the presentation with the panel, but this is a really important understanding that not all of those who batter are the same. That there are many who are driven by an entitlement-based motive, that I have privilege, I am superior, I am in charge, I'm the man of the house, I'm the king of the castle, and what I say goes. And over the years in battering intervention, we've kind of painted everybody as having that belief and that we have to address and challenge those beliefs and help to build equality. But treating everybody as if they're entitled is a mistake, because there's many people who are driven by a different motive. For example, you see over here in this blue circle over here, the survival-based. The survival-based are quite different than the entitled. They don't necessarily see themselves as the king of the castle. They see themselves as hanging on for dear life. That without the mantra for them, and they'll tell you in your groups when you ask them, all you have to do is just say, so if your partner left you, what would happen to you? And they would say, I would have nothing. They see themselves with very few social supports, if any, most often none. They see themselves as highly dependent on their partner for their welfare and essentially for their survival. And understanding the survival base in the room is really important, Because if a survival-based person says, I just got served with a protection order, or I just got served with divorce papers, or I think my partner is getting ready to leave me, that is an incredibly dangerous situation for the survival base. And the research is pretty clear. Dobash and Dobash have written about this in their great domestic violence book. They talk about that the survival base will switch, they'll flip a switch. They'll go from desperately hanging on to, fine, if you're going to leave me, if I really believe you're gone, then I am going to destroy you the way you are destroying me. And I would argue that most, if not all, of the homicide, suicide, domestic violence involve survival based, not entitlement based. Right? I would argue that most of the domestic violence homicides, and I sat on the governor's domestic violence fatality review board for years, that most of the domestic violence homicides are connected to the survival base. I would also tell you that most of the police officers who are killed when they're going on domestic violence calls are being killed by someone who's driven by a survival-based motive. And we don't talk about this. We talk about mostly entitlement. Now, there's subcategories of entitlement-based, and you can see the yellow circle there is a materially motivated. The materially motivated is highly entitled, but they're in relationships only for benefit, only for material benefit. Right? For an example, they might date a nurse's aide and they'll be in a relationship, but then they build a relationship with a nurse who makes more money. And so they just will drop their girlfriend and start a relationship with the person who makes more money. They're the ones that are commonly trafficking their partners. Right? In Kansas, there's a significant number of known traffickers who are trafficking partners who never were in the sex trade before their materially motivated battering partner put them out there and sold them for sex. They have their partner out there selling drugs for them. They are in the relationship for material gain. Right? And if we understand that, it helps us with our intervention and it helps us with our safety planning for victims of domestic violence. Now, I'm guessing that most of you would be aware that there's also a group of batterers, of those who batter, who are sadistically based, who are battering or inflicting cruelty, who are plotting and planning to cause great harm because they gain pleasure out of that. And we see them showing up in our groups. I would argue there's a very small percentage. I'm guessing about 10% of those we serve might be on the sadistic motivated continuum. When we talk about gaslighting, enjoying watching somebody feel crazy, that is a sadistic battering motive behavior, right? People who are survival based are probably not gaslighting their partner. People who are entitled probably are not gaslighting their partner. To assume that all who are battering might gaslight really waters down the issue. There's behaviors that if we enjoy inflicting pain and suffering, controlling our partner, heart, mind, body, and soul, that is a sadistic base. The planning and the plotting is hallmark of the sadistic base. And when we talk about planning, it's not just what I'm going to do tomorrow. They're planning for months. They're planning for years. They are slowly disconnecting their partner from resources, from support systems, isolating them to be able to inflict great harm over time. And they're sitting in our rooms. And so if we think about all of these motives as entitlement based, I just want to reiterate that what we're doing is we are lumping everybody into the same bucket, and intervening with a sadistic base is not the same as intervening with someone who's entitlement based. And someone who's materially motivated needs to be looking at things a little bit differently than someone who is survival based. And so I want you to be aware of that. We have an online course on our website that's on Thinkific that you can take a 3-hour course to be able to learn about the motives of those who batter. And I would tell you it will change the way you look at the people in your room. It will change the way that you are working with victims of domestic violence, because you will start connecting some dots that need to be connected. Um, Now, let me pause there just for a moment. I've said quite a bit. And what are there any questions, comments, thoughts, that you would like to share at this point before I move on?
Steve, did you want me to attach all the documents that you had sent me, the PDFs?
That would be terrific if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Okay.
I'm just wondering how closely you tie your use and understanding of trauma to the survival-based motives.
That's a great question, Olivia. Thank you for asking that. We started really recognizing the prevalence of trauma when talking with the survival-based. They are, if you want to use ACEs score as an example, they are the very high ACE scores. They are the 7s, 8s, and 9s. They have common abandonment in their history. I can show you videos of people talking about their survival-based behavior and their history of what happened to them long before. There is a very high prevalence of trauma in the survival-based. And I would argue that that's the doorway to intervene, to be able to build an introspection with them about how their abandonment has impacted them, how their long list of abusive experiences have affected them. And becoming self-aware is really the beginning of all trauma interventions. And so, can I ask, why did you ask that specifically about them? I think that was a good question.
I work with the Alma Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know Terry.
I thought so. I heard a podcast, I think either you were on it together or something like that. Right. And yeah, they do a lot of trauma-informed work with their participants, and just really look at when someone is living with unresolved trauma, they're stuck in a survival brain. And that really keeps someone from being able to, from their brain function to be firing at all capacity. So that I had a follow-up question about why you use, what's the thoughts that go behind using cruelty over trauma? Because I appreciate that distinction. It's really curious to me. So I just wanted to hear you talk more about that as well.
Yeah, that was a bold step that we took. After I read Alice Miller, Alice Miller was talking about cruelty. She was talking about the way it's passed, the way people experience cruelty, and if they don't heal from it and recover from it and accept the adverse emotions connected to it, they can pass it on to others, or they can heap it upon themselves, right? So cruelty is either moving out or it's moving in. And while I was reading that book, it really resonated to me that we don't have any trouble at all talking about animal cruelty. We don't have any trouble. If I kick my dog, people go, "Whoa, that's cruel." What the heck? But when we talk about domestic violence, if I hit you or hit my partner, then that's domestic. And it just felt so watered down. It felt like that's not the issue. We have to be talking about cruelty. And the two definitions that we use for that are the intentional infliction of pain and suffering upon somebody. Do I hurt you on purpose? Or the blatant disregard, right? That I make a decision that impacts you and I do not take your interests into account, right? I don't consider what's best for you, what you might want, what your dreams are. I just make a decision because that's what's good for me. And when I read that book, quite honestly, Olivia, it was the first time I realized that making a tea time at the golf course could be an act of cruelty if I don't take my wife's interests into account, because someone's got to watch our kid while I'm out there spending 5 hours on the golf course. So it changed my whole perspective of what are we talking about. We're not just talking about power and control. We're talking about the blatant disregard, whether it is me making decisions or on a social scale, whether it's racism or sexism or economic abuse, whatever it would be. Cruelty is on all levels, and we all have to be aware of how it plays itself and it gets passed around. And so we dropped the term domestic violence. I think if you come to our program and sit in, I don't know that you would hear the term domestic violence rarely. It probably comes up. But we are talking about cruelty all the time. You will hear the word cruelty 5 to 10 times in a class as we are exploring how we blatantly disregarded or intentionally inflicted pain and suffering. And
Thank you. Yeah, maybe you'll get into it later, but yeah, I'll be curious to hear just how you got. I asked a similar question to Alice, but how you got judges and probation officers and state's attorneys to take that language seriously, because they're in the field. There's just such a focus on these people need to take accountability for the domestic violence, and how you got central stakeholders to zoom out and take seriously the context within which the instance of domestic violence is happening within a larger context of cruelty. So
Yes.
I don't know if you'll go there or not, but
Yeah. Well, I can tell you in Kansas, we're very lucky. Dorothy, my wife, co-founder of the Family Peace Initiative, was the director of victim services for the Attorney General's office in Kansas. And having the bully pulpit and having the ability to have the influence that comes with that office was really gave us the ability to legislate ways and things into the laws that if we don't have people in those positions as advocates and allies, it's I hear other states struggling trying to get things built into their legal system. And so we had people in the right places, and they took years to get there. It was being laying foundation for years, probably 2 decades, to be able to make that happen. But Alice also talked about the social networking, right? Being able to connect with all the key players, the community coordinated response. The court system is looking for answers on what to do with these people. And if we can offer them help, if we can be seen as allies for them, they are excited to work with us. But not all, right? As soon as you get it established, somebody gets unelected and a new person comes in, and now we're starting all over again, and here we go again. And so it's a moving target, at least in my experience, on a regular basis. Olivia, thank you for those questions.
thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to talk with you a little bit about, and I don't know, in the packets there's a river of cruelty map, and I was wondering if you would, if I could, maybe it's in there that I can just pull it up in the chat. Can you pull it up in the shared screen, Ida? Is that something I could ask you to do?
Let me grab it real quick. Hold on.
Because what we started realizing, and we were moving this way for quite some time, we really found that there needed to be a trauma-focused response. The curriculum we were using back in the 90s did not have a parenting section, which we thought was really important to have, because trauma gets passed on from generation to generation. Oh, Ida, thank you. That is perfect.
Can you see it?
Yes. Did everybody see that, I hope? And so we started out thinking that we would teach people some internal focus skills, how to be able to create that internal focus dialogue to help people really become authentic and genuine. And what evolved was a whole trauma focused curriculum that we have put together. We didn't really intend to write a curriculum. What we were planning on doing was helping other programs just be better. Whatever curriculum or approach you're using, these skills of being able to lead by example, to be able to create the internal focus dialogue, to be able to pursue the emotional regulation with people and helping them develop an awareness of their bodies. That's all stuff that can be included in any approach to domestic violence or to intervening with cruelty, right? It's all stuff. And so what we're saying is you want the gender responsive, you want the social structure and the social systems, and you want the trauma focus piece all lumped together in your approach. And we believe that we have seen the evidence of our effectiveness getting better. I want to show you this map because I still remember the day we created it. It was an amazing experience in the women's prison in Topeka. Janae Kent and I, we've been talking for some time about we need a visual. We need a map. We need something to be able to show people what we're talking about. And after a group, we had some amazing conversations in the group, and the women did some remarkable work. And we got on this chalkboard after group and started drawing boxes and arrows, and there was just stuff all over the place. And this is what we came up with. This is kind of a newer version. But I want to walk you through it. And the easiest way to understand it is to apply this to yourself. If you look at it as an external focused thing, then it's kind of hard. But if you turn it inward to an internal focus, it makes sense to people on a different level. So the river of cruelty starts when we experience cruelty. And the ACEs study that I was introduced to had a 10-item questionnaire. And I scored a 0 on the 10-item questionnaire. I was really upset about that because I can tell you a whole handful of things that happened to me growing up that did not get taken into account. One of them being that my brother, who was just a couple years older, would beat me up on a regular basis. And that was not taken into account by the ACEs questionnaire. Also, me being bullied on the school playground to where I was afraid to go to recess was not taken into account on the ACEs questionnaire. Being sexually abused by someone less than 5 years older than me was not taken into account on the ACEs questionnaire. So I would encourage you, the ACEs questionnaire, the ACEs study is amazing, right? It shows the long-term impact of cruelty over the lifespan. But I would encourage you to not be deceived by putting too much value on individual scores, because someone can have a 2 and their experience could be way worse than someone who has a 7. Right? It's just trauma is a different experience for every person, and we need to allow for everybody's stories. And so being aware that it informs us, but don't be deceived by the number. So when we come into our classes, what we do is we brainstorm all the forms of cruelty that people can experience between the age of 0 and 18. And we'll get a list of easily 50 items when we have a group that's engaged in making a list. It is easy to get a long list of cruelties, from abandonment, from physical abuse, from being neglected, from losing your brother in a car wreck, from being the lone survivor of a plane crash, and on and on and on. All these things are forms of cruelty that kids have to manage. And cruelty always activates emotions. That's not weird, right? And what they do, cruelty activates adverse feelings. Feelings that you wake up in the morning, you woke up this morning planning on not feeling. You had probably a strategy of what you were going to do. So I woke up this morning and go, man, I don't want to look stupid in this New Mexico thing. How do I make sure that I just don't look stupid about what's going on? So I have a plan. I get busy with my PowerPoints and I try to figure out what I'm going to say. And part of that is just self-preservation, because I'm afraid that I'm going to look bad, that I'm going to let you down, that things aren't going. I have feelings that I'm dedicated to trying to avoid. And that's what our adverse feelings are. The unpleasant feelings that we don't want to have. Cruelty always activates them, right? If it doesn't, then maybe you didn't experience cruelty, or maybe you are so numb from previous cruelty that maybe you can't feel it anymore, right? Which is not weird for some people. But we make a list of all the adverse feelings that people might have as a result of the 50 items on the list of cruelty that we just made. And you can imagine what's on the list. Oh, I don't want to feel stupid. I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel afraid. I don't want to feel like I'm nothing. I don't want to feel invisible. On and on and on. And if I left out ones that you're familiar with, I didn't mean to. I'm just giving you examples. And so none of that is weird. When you experience cruelty, you have adverse feelings. That is a human experience. But where things go awry in the river of cruelty is what happens when those feelings get activated. And I'm hoping that you grew up in a family that had such emotional awareness that they could sense that you were feeling some kind of adverse feeling, and they wrapped you up in their arms and they said, I know you're feeling sad. I know you're feeling afraid. I know you're feeling weak. Of course you would feel that way based on what happened to you. And come here, I love you. That's normal. That's not weird. And we're going to be okay together. Most of us didn't have that. I grew up in a house that was very non-emotional. It was all cerebral, education focused. Right? It was not feeling stuff. I saw my dad choke up for the first time when he was giving his mother's eulogy at her funeral. And I poked my brother in the side. I said, did you see that? It was so weird to see my dad be emotional other than smiling or angry. And so the adverse feelings, if they don't get accepted, if they don't get validated, if they don't get, the process of working through them, then we have to come up with a strategy to avoid them. We have to come up with a way to get away from them. They don't go away. Alice Miller talks about us storing this stuff at a cellular level, but they can be pushed out of our consciousness. And so defense systems, I'm convinced, I say this all the time, I'm sure there's a set finite number of defense systems that we can use to avoid our adverse feelings. I don't know, maybe 217 is probably all we have to pick from. But we will only pick the ones that work for us, right? If it doesn't help us avoid our adverse feelings, then that one's not any good. We got to come up with a better one. So maybe we go numb. Oh, that doesn't work. Maybe I'll get drunk. Oh, maybe I'll be a workaholic. Maybe I'll be really promiscuous. Maybe I'll eat Twinkies all day long. Maybe I will do all kinds of things. There's a bunch of them. And you all know the ones that you use, because most of us have restricted emotional expressions. So if we can't express these, we have to do something else. And you know what your defense systems are, right? And they're normal. It's not weird. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's what we do when we grow up in a society where emotional expression is not really welcome. And so we've experienced the cruelty. It activates adverse feelings. We don't know what to do with these feelings, so we have to come up. Some of the things that I use, I got very aggressive. My sister was treated incredibly cruelly by me for years. I became very arrogant and cocky. I used a lot of drugs when I was growing up. I started drinking at an early age. I became very rebellious. I dropped out of school, essentially. Right? I got sent away from home, and I didn't graduate from high school, except that my physics teacher gave me a passing grade. I did not pass physics, and I want you to know that you're speaking to someone who really didn't graduate from high school, because I didn't care. I lost my ability to be caring about anything, because if I had to care, I was going to have to feel something, and I didn't want to do that. So these are all defense systems I use. You have your own. And as a facilitator, you would want to know, this is what I do, because if you understand yourself, then you can understand the people sitting in front of you better. Now, Alice Miller speaks to this too, by the way. The Family Peace Initiative in our trainings, a major focus of this is helping you as a participant, a facilitator, to do your own work and grapple with your own river of cruelty. Because Alice Miller says that we can only take people as far as we're able to go within ourselves. And so suddenly, me doing my personal work can benefit a victim of domestic violence. And I'm all in for that. If me doing my personal work is just going to help me have a better life, I ain't in for that. My life is okay. But if me doing my personal work is going to help me to help somebody else be safer, which I want you to know I have experienced that over and over in my time as a facilitator. As I got better at knowing me, I was better at helping victims of domestic violence be safer. And I've seen that in so many others as well. And so when you meet the Family Peace Initiative facilitators, you're meeting people, they're not perfect. Right? But I can tell you, they've done a lot of work on themselves, and they're working very hard to keep pushing their envelope so that they can be there when that one situation shows up where they've got to really be able to be present in an intense emotional load so that they can help somebody who's not even in the room to be safer. So We want to be aware of our defense systems, but the interesting thing about the river of cruelty is that our defense systems bring with them consequences, right? I call them unintended consequences because we don't plan on getting the DUI. We just planned on going and drinking a fifth of vodka so we didn't have to feel sad because our grandmother died. We're not going, oh, gee, I hope I get a DUI. Oh, I hope I get arrested. Oh, I hope my wife leaves me today. Oh, I hope I don't see my kids except every other weekend and on Wednesdays. Oh, I hope I get to spend 10 or 15 years in prison. We don't wake up that way. There are consequences of our defense systems. And if you get what I've just told you, these are consequences of our fear of our own emotional selves. It's remarkable if you stop and think about it. If you're not afraid of your emotional self, I can tell you your life will change. Because if I don't have to protect, if I don't need my defense systems, if I can just recognize, oh, I feel really weak. Oh, I feel really stupid. Oh, I feel broken right now. I feel really inadequate right now. And it'll pass. I've felt that before. It's not weird. Of course, I feel inadequate. I said something that I shouldn't have said. It'll pass. It always does. I don't have to act on it. I don't have to defend it. I can just sit with it. And it passes. Always has. So our consequences are the products of the defense systems. And the men in your groups will talk about, I lost my dreams. I lost my family. I lost my house. I lost my everything. All because I couldn't feel sad. All because I didn't want to feel weak. Now, all of that together is held together kind of like brick and mortar by the beliefs and attitudes. And this is where we come into line with the cognitive behavioral approaches of looking at our beliefs, because we believe things to be facts that are just beliefs. It's so weird, right? If you at 50 years old or however you are still arguing with me that Santa Claus is a thing, I would go, dude, I think you're kind of hanging on to something that's we're over that Santa Claus is going to land on your roof thing. But when we were 8 years old, we believed that like it was absolute truth, and it influenced our behavior. I left cookies on the hearth, and Santa always took one damn bite. And my mom would explain, oh, it's because if Santa ate a cookie at every stop, he'd never get down the chimney then, right? And so he's got to just be careful. I believed it to be true. I'm just talking to you about Santa Claus because our beliefs and attitudes, we believe them to be facts, but they're beliefs. They're things that we have chosen or we have adopted. And these are the beliefs that drive our abusive behavior. I got to be the man of the house. Because if I'm not the man of the house, what does that say about me? That I'm soft, that I'm weak, that I'm nothing, that I'm a pushover, that I'm a pansy. If I don't win, I'm a loser. Don't trust anybody because they're just going to get you. And when somebody says in your room, don't trust anyone, what did they just tell you? They've told you that somebody very important to them betrayed them. They had to learn not to trust people by being betrayed. We bring most of these beliefs and attitudes to our lives as a product of the cruelty that we experienced. It's not weird. I'm the man of the house because if I'm not the man, I'm soft and weak. And I've been soft and weak when I was growing up, and I'm never going to do that again. So now I'm going to rule the roost so that nobody can get one over on me. Product of cruelty. Our beliefs come from us honestly. They come to us honestly. It's not weird. We just have to learn to ask the questions. Do you remember the first time you were weak? What would it say about you if your partner had equal say? Right? What would it say about you if you weren't the king of that castle? What would it say about you if you did lose? There's hundreds of beliefs. You have them right now, right? You're carrying beliefs and attitudes in your life that you have, and I can tell you, you've adopted some of them to be facts, right? They're absolute truths, but many of them are coming from cruel, blatant disregard, intentional infliction of pain and suffering. And we've adopted those as never again. I will never feel that pain and suffering, that weakness again. And so what I'm going to do is become king of the castle. I'm going to rule the roost. My way or the highway. Trauma. It's trauma. And so what we have is this process that helps people in our class. I just did this in the group just last night. We build these river maps. And then we ask people to share their story. What was a cruelty you experienced? What were your adverse feelings? What are your defense systems that you use? What are the consequences you've had as a result of your defense systems? And what are the beliefs and attitudes that hold this all together? And where did those beliefs and attitudes come from? Now we're back to cruelty again. And if you see on the end of the beliefs and attitudes, there's this arrow that we drew as the painful shift. And our staff named it the painful shift because in our experience, it's a painful shift. Because the defense systems, the consequences, the beliefs and attitudes are protecting us from adverse feelings that we're not interested in experiencing. And to defeat the river of cruelty, to get out of the river, as we say it around here, requires us to become acquainted and to accept the adverse feelings that we've spent perhaps a lifetime trying to avoid. And that's a scary, painful proposition. If they didn't hurt, we wouldn't be worried about them. But they hurt. And so we develop a huge system that sabotages our lives. We lose connection with our kids and our dreams, and we build criminal records and acquire addictions because we don't want to feel something that's uncomfortable. And that's weird. But it turns out it's what humans do. Humans escape and avoid pain at all costs, even if it creates more pain. It's better than having to feel weak. It's better than having to feel grief. It's better than having to feel hopeless. It's better. And so helping people touch the adverse feelings, helping people in a slow, methodical process become less afraid of their adverse feelings intervenes with domestic violence. Because if I'm not afraid of myself, you're safe from me. If I'm afraid of myself and the feelings that might come up with me, and you happen to be the one that stirs up those feelings, and I'm afraid of them, I might, what we call, hand them back to you like a football. I might be afraid, and I don't want to feel afraid, so I'll make you feel afraid. And somehow that's a psychological relief for me. That's weird. You hear that all the time in the groups. I was so afraid she was going to leave, and so I scared the hell out of her, because maybe then she'd stay. That's weird. But it's better than having to sit with the feeling that I have not been trained, I don't know how to feel. Now, John Gottman wrote a great book I would encourage you to read. It's called Raising an Emotionally Healthy Child. And in that book, he talks about the power of mad, sad, glad, and afraid. And people laugh at us about, why do you simplify feelings? There's so many words for feelings. And we're like, well, we're dealing with people who are not emotionally savvy, who have extreme emotional restricted expression. So we want to simplify it to where they can just think in uncomplicated terms, mad, sad, glad, or afraid. And we argue that those are the primary colors of emotions. I don't know, who's the artist in the room? What's the primary colors in art? What are they? I think it's red and blue, and is it yellow? Did I get it?
I believe
Right?
it's you.
Well, I'm not an artist, and if you saw any of my pictures, you would agree with me. I'm not an artist, right? I do other things. But mad, sad, glad, and afraid, sad, glad, and afraid are the three primary basic, all feelings get boiled down to sad, afraid, and glad. Some of you have never heard that until today, but it's a very powerful intervention to help people slowly. I'm mad. I'm really mad. I'm mad. I lost my job. My dang employer, he's a jerk. Wow, you're mad. That's external focused. I'm mad at my employer. And so when you learn how to help people see the fear behind the mad, the sadness behind the mad, that's internal focused, and people change. As soon as they move from external focus to internal focus, oh, I'm sad. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my house. I'm afraid I'm not going to get another job like that one. I'm afraid I'm not going to pay my bills. I'm afraid that how are we going to support my baby? What's my future going to hold? Now I'm afraid. Thanks. And what's really surprising for people is that you don't have to be mad just because you're afraid. You can be afraid without having to be mad. And being able to teach that to the people in your room about emotional intelligence, mad, sad, glad, and afraid, brings a new light. And by the way, it keeps you as a facilitator safer because we teach people right away. Every time you're mad, you're afraid of something. Afraid is an adverse feeling. People are dedicated to hiding that they're afraid. Many times you'll hear people say, I'm not afraid of anything. We're like, yeah, well, okay, we'll see. All right, but that's okay. But afraid is an adverse feeling. And if I know that anger helps me to see your fear, then people will stop using anger because it's not working. Defense systems are only used if they work. And if somebody's dedicated to not being seen afraid, then they're not going to get mad if they know that I know that just lurking right behind that being that angry expression is somebody who's afraid or afraid and sad. And being able to help people changes the conversation in the room, and people start talking about themselves, which is the internal focused dialogue. Anytime they're blaming their partner, anytime they're yelling at their court service officer, or anytime they're mad at you or the financial thing that you're doing or whatever, they're just telling you that you're afraid or that they're afraid. And I used to be worried about people who were angry, but now I look forward to it. Because if I do a good job in the conversation, by the time we're done, they're going to be having a conversation about being afraid and sad. And the internal focus conversation is where transformational change occurs. You cannot create transformational change without it. Now, there are ways that people change, right? There can be a single incident that happens. Some people change just because they get arrested. I'm never going back to jail again. Holy cow. I hated that feeling. But for most people, change is a process. So this river of cruelty informs everything that we're doing. And so when we're in conversations in our room, when we're using different sessions in our curriculum, we're always thinking, what part of the box are we in? And if we're in an unintended consequence box, we want to move from there because change does not occur there. Right? We don't talk people, oh, look at you, you lost your kids and you don't get to see them because you were so horrible. Can't you see? They don't logically make sense of that. We need to be able to move to the defense systems, and the target is always the adverse feelings. Right? Now, I want to pause there. I just covered a tremendous amount of ground, and I'm afraid of oversimplifying this. Because when you create this and get things written on paper and you get your group really diving into this, it can activate lots of emotional energy. It can create realizations that people had never thought about. Oh my gosh, I didn't start drinking until my grandmother died. And my grandmother was my enlightened witness. I hope you all know what an enlightened witness is. I've written about it on Aquila. I've put it out on our blog posts. Enlightened witness are some of the what Alice Miller calls the real life angels of our existence. They're the people we go to find out or to remind us that we are loved. Really important people who just loved us for who we were. We didn't have to do anything to earn it. They just were there. I could come up with about 5 enlightened witnesses who really showed up at the right time in my life. Our enlightened witnesses give us something that's immeasurable. Our enlightened witnesses, the people who love us, give us a message about ourselves that we call our golden shadow message. I'm
10 minutes,
valuable.
Steve, sorry,
10 minutes, Ida?
10 minutes, yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop here in just a minute and just hopefully entertain some questions and conversation. But I wanted to finish by connecting participants with the people who love them by helping them to grab onto a golden shadow message that I'm loved, I'm valuable, I'm seen, I'm somebody, I'm worthy, I'm special, whatever it might be. It's an amazing conversation because it activates the ventral vagal system in the brain. Stephen Porges says all we have to do is remember being loved, and our ventral vagal system, our social engagement system, gets activated. Right? We have to be able to do things, and the memory of being loved activates this. And I will tell you something that I believe. I don't have any evidence to support this at this point, but I want you to know I believe that we are never violent and cruel when we're in our ventral vagal social engagement system, when we're living out of our golden shadow message. Every time we are violent and cruel, we are living out of our shadow message, which is Jungian psychology. My shadow message happens to be that I'm stupid and worthless. And did you hear me say, wow, I woke up this morning trying to protect myself from not looking stupid in front of you? That's not a coincidence. That's shadow message talk. Right? And helping people move to an internal focused conversation that includes shadow message and golden shadow message is a game changer in transformational change. Because I'm no longer cruel to Dorothy because she yelled at me. I'm cruel because I was emotionally incompetent and I wasn't able to manage my shadow message, and I gave it to her. And Alice Miller says that's exactly how cruelty is passed. We have a shadow message. You have a shadow message. If you don't have a shadow message, you are weird and need to be studied in a social construct and somehow. And when you have a shadow message, if you are not able to manage it and recognize it when it gets activated, one of the ways you can manage it is to give it away. We give it away by yelling. We give it away by being violent. We give it away by ignoring. I don't want to feel stupid, so let me give it to you, and I'll make you feel stupid. And having these conversations invites people to a higher level of emotional maturity. We can do this. We can be more responsible for ourselves, but we have to recognize where we're giving up responsibility. And domestic violence is always one of those places. We're talking about power and control, domination, control, but the people who are using the domination and control are people who feel really powerless. And so they're desperate to try to get it. And we're not having enough conversations about how do we help people access their own personal power and not give away their shadow message and live more in their golden shadow message. Because if I believe that I'm okay, I give that to you. My golden shadow message is just simply that I'm okay. Dr. Lynch gave me that message. Mrs. Jones gave me that message. A lot of different people in my life community. I don't need to do anything for them to love me. I'm okay. And when I believe that about myself, I give that away to others. And so do you. When you believe your golden shadow message, it changes your behavior. And you give that away to others. If you believe you're special, and not better, but just special in your own way, you give away that feeling of special to others. It's not weird. We do it daily. And we've incorporated these trauma responsive approaches into our language. And so our participants know their river of cruelty. They know their shadow messages. They know their golden shadow messages. They know their enlightened witness. Right? They understand because we're building an internal focused conversation that is the necessary ingredient to transformational change. I don't have to give you a good talk on women's equality. I don't have to lecture you on, the damage of domination and control in relationships. I just have to help you get into your story because your story is powerful. But for most of us, we're afraid of our emotional energy, and so we hide from our story and we weaken ourselves and ultimately pass cruelty on to others. Now, I just saw your hand and I was like, okay, I'll stop. But I know when we created the river of cruelty, we knew we were on dangerous ground because it kind of was flowing against the common thoughts about intervening with domestic violence. And what I'm wanting you to hear is that we're talking about an intervention. We're talking about if someone's using violence, what's the best way to give us the best chance to change? And I argue that a trauma responsive approach is an amazing doorway to helping create that. I'm not saying it causes domestic violence. I'm not saying that gender violence is not a huge deal. But in intervening, creating an internal focused dialogue is the ingredient. And we have a facilitators training series of 3 individual training workshops to help you to master how to create the internal focused dialogue. Now I'll stop, Ida. Thank you so much.
There's a chat from Rich. Can you talk about your program's relationship with criminal legal systems that often deliver cruelty and your own experience as probation officer? How do we end cruelty in those systems? Great question.
And that was Rich that asked that. That is a great question. You know, we have people that come to our program that say, you're talking about cruelty, and I was treated cruel by my prison guard. I was treated cruel by my prison. Cruelty abounds in our lives. It is everywhere. And I don't argue that. It's absolutely true. You know, people use the system for domination and control of the people that they're working with. It is not a trauma informed. It activates their ventral vagal systems. And I think that, you know, my view is to start by teaching people cruelty, the intentional infliction of pain and suffering, the blatant disregard. We train probation officers. We are training, you know, jail and prison officers. We are training the legal system. We are training educators to elevate emotional expression in kindergartners and first grade. We are trying very hard to spread the information about cruelty. And Rich, I would invite you to join us and do the same. I think it's really important that we start having conversations about cruelty. But I agree with you, cruelty is in the system for sure.
Any other questions or comments for Steve? Miss Cookie.
Hey, Julie, good to have you here, by the way. Oh. You know, I want to tell you that on our website, I have like approaching 7 years of blogs, of monthly blogs, that are specifically designed for facilitators. They're now being used by educators, they're being used by people in the system. But you can go, there's like 3 years of video blogs, and then there's like 4 years of written, you know, pages. It's all just our perspective and what we found and what we've learned, a trauma responsive approach to intervening with domestic violence. And I know that there's people who spend an enormous amount of time in there just studying and listening and considering, and then they call and challenge, and we get into debates and conversations about how to do this work better. And I live for that. I live for how do we do this work better, because the costs are too high. If we don't figure this out, it's just going to perpetuate cruelty for more generations to come. We got about 1 more minute. If you have a question on the tip of your tongue, this is a great time to do it. If not, you can email me.
I put the link to his blog on the chat for anybody that's interested as well. And before we exit out, we're going to have lunch break for an hour. And you guys are more than welcome to join us on the expo. Once you join the lobby, you click on the top right. It should say expo. Just click join and either zoom out or scroll up. I don't know which option you'll get. And that's where we'll have our timer. So otherwise, thank you, Steve. Any other questions? I know something popped up real quick. Great presentation. Always such a joy to hear.
So what's expo group or?
The expo is just where we're gonna, it's just like a little area where you can just chat with anybody else, network with anybody else if you feel free to. And again, we'll have the timer there for the lunch period. So it's optional if you want.
And then what is the booth?
It just says when you click on Expo, it gives you a little option to enter the booth. I don't know why it was named that, but it just enter the booth, and then it'll take you into the zone where you can chat with anybody else that's in that room.
Mhm.
And I had one last question.
Mhm.
So I noticed that each person who's doing a presentation, that there was the 4 different presentations, but they're all at the same time and they're all being recorded. So how would we be able to see the other presentations?
Mhm.
You'll get, everybody's gonna get a copy of the PowerPoint that each presenter is doing. I'm gonna ask Terry to see if the recordings are gonna be passed out as well. I'll check and then I'll get back to you on that, Angelique, just to make sure.
It's my
Oh.
understanding that you'll have access to all of them, because I want to go back and hear what Alice and Jessica and Chris are saying too. I'm very interested, and I kind of, so I appreciate what you're asking there.
Yes, so I'll confirm with you, Angelique.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted to see what everybody had to say, not just what one person had to say. And then I didn't realize that they were like all at the same time. And I was most interested in in this presentation, but I only seen the last 20 minutes of it. I didn't realize that you had to pick.
You'll get I'm pretty sure you'll get a copy of them. So like I said, I'll get back to you on that just to make sure. But thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll be back in an hour at 20 after. Enjoy your lunch. Thanks, Steve.
Enjoy the conference, you all. Thank you very much.